Hello and welcome back to the channel, where today I'm going to be taking you through 5 different types of boat anchors, and I'm going to discuss their pros and cons to help you decide what anchor to use on your boat, and we'll also discuss a few other anchor related things as well. Now, something I want to highlight before we go into the different types of anchors is that an anchor isn't just for your fishing, it's a really important safety feature that you need to have on your boat. Every summer I hear calls on the radio from people who go out once or twice a year. They've got in distress, they're heading towards a danger such as the rocks or a lighthouse, and they haven't got an anchor with them. That's why it's so important to choose the right anchor, and one that's actually going to do its job and grip in the ground. And of course to make sure you got one on board. And first up on our list is the Plow Anchor, recognisable by most people. So cool because it actually looks like a farmer's plough. It's very similar shape to what they use to plough their fields with on the back of the tractors. You get 2 types. You get this one here, which has a hinge, as you can see here, halfway up, and it flexes. And the other ones are solid piece anchors, i.e. they're all one piece. But the end bit, the bit that digs in, is exactly the same on both. Now the pros of this is it fits onto most bow rollers, so if you've got a davit or a winch and it comes up into your little slot, it sits in there quite well, doesn't bounce around, doesn't flap about, and it fits nicely. And it performs well in most bottoms, this one. The cons though, it can have a tendency to drag in poor conditions. So when you get a bit of rough weather and a bit of extra tension, because of the design of it, the Plow Anchor, it actually starts to literally plough the bottom. And it's not cool because of that. You know, that's not how it's designed to be. It's designed to dig in. But when you get that bit of extra tension, this one can really pull, which means you obviously, of course, then slip and drag your anchor, resulting in you going into the wreck or moving off of your mark. Next up is the most common anchor I think I see on boats, and that is the Bruce anchor, and that's what it looks like just there. It has 2 sort of wings out to the side and then a little spike in the middle. Now this one, the pros to this is it sets really easily. As soon as that's touching down, the shape and design of it means that little point in the middle starts digging in, and then the 2 wings on the side really hook in, and it does that quite quickly. And it also resets easy if it's tripped. So if you've got some poor sea conditions, or perhaps you haven't let out enough rope and you suddenly realise, as soon as you're letting that go again or it digs back into the bottom, it really does dig and bed in quite quickly again and starts holding you back in place. And another one of this pros is it works really well in most sea states. So if you've got a bit of heavy tide running, or you've got a bit of up and down motion in the sea, this one still grips really, really well. The cons to this though, it has less holding power per kilo of anchor. So obviously you'll have an anchor that weighs 5, 7.5, 10 kilos. Each anchor is designed to hold a certain amount of boat in place in weight and pull terms. The Bruce is on the lesser side of that compared to others. And it also struggles to get a dig and a bed in hard clay as well. Not quite sure why, but it does. It tends to not bed in as much as it does on other bottoms. Coming on to the Danforth, otherwise known as the Fluke. This is actually the anchor that I have on Easy Living. It's my favourite anchor, and the reason being is it is second to none for fishing in soft ground. It is absolutely a machine when it comes to sticking on things like sand and clay and gravel. You stick this in, your boat does not move. It is absolutely brilliant. The design of it, the long bar through the middle actually sits down, it flexes, and it collapses between the 2 big teeth, as it were. And it just sticks. You do not move, and it also stows virtually flat, so it makes it a really good spare anchor as well, because it takes up minimal space, so it's not sticking up out the air. It folds virtually flat. The cons though is it is probably one of the worst performing anchors for rocky, reefy ground. It just doesn't dig in. It almost, those 2 teeth, because they're in points, it struggles to bed in. And it also, the other flip side to this is if it trips, it struggles to reset, and it can tend to ski on the bottom, almost lays flat and just bounces on. So bear that in mind if you're using this. But I absolutely love this anchor. Like I said, it's the one I use on my own boat. Can't speak highly enough of the Danforth. I just quickly want to touch base on the chain. Never put an anchor in without a chain unless you're using a sacrificial anchor, which is a different matter altogether. But the length of chain is really important on your boat. Minimum length of your vessel, so whatever your length of your boat is what you need in chain. Something like 6-10 mil, and it's often actually the chain that wraps around the rocks and is what's keeping your boat still compared to the anchor in certain bottoms. So don't neglect your chain as well as your anchor. Next up is the not too common mushroom anchor. So cool because it looks like an upside down mushroom. It's basically a bowl with a point in the middle with a shackle at the top, as you can see from the picture. Large ones tend to make permanent moorings in tidal marinas and stuff like that, and estuaries. They're great for tenders. They're very good in really soft, silty bottoms. The silt sort of overflows into the bowl and it acts like basically a big dish that catches the mud. But they are really, really bad in most other types of grounds, and they struggle in bad weather, and you need a massive sized one relatively compared to the size of the boat you're mooring, just because they don't have any sort of, other than the fact that they rely on sinking into the silt, they've got no anchor points, as it were, like the spikes like a Danforth has, for instance. Therefore, other than really for a permanent mooring, I wouldn't recommend having this on your boat unless you're maybe a kayaker or a sib. Now, finally, last but not least, is the Grapnel anchor. Now, these are really common with sib and kayak users because they're just brilliant for those sort of fishermen. They collapse down nice and small. I've inserted a picture on my left there of both open and closed. It's almost got like a little cap that you remove that locks it in place. Now, they're really good because they don't take up any space. They don't come in larger sizes, these ones, because of their design. They are designed mainly at the smaller boat market, and I'd imagine most sib and kayakers, this is what they use. If that's different, please do let me know in the comments. They're brilliant over rocky, reefy ground. They just stick because you see they've got 4 prongs there. They drag along and they hook in. It's almost like the old Batman grapnel hooks he used to throw over the roofs. Hooks on and climbs up. Very similar sort of thing here, but it's a boat, obviously. And like I said there, it stows away easy. Now, the cons, it can be hard to retrieve because of their design, and you're sticking this into reefs. They can be a nightmare, and if you're in a sib or a kayak, you haven't got the horsepower to blast away half the time. They're not the best on soft ground, and they're not brilliant for larger boats. If you've got a larger boat, you're probably going to want one of the other ones we've already covered. Now, just quickly touching on your length of rope and your chain and the rest of it. If you've got a bit of tidal run, you're going to need to let a bit more rope off, otherwise you're going to pull the anchor out. And likewise, if you've got a bit of a rough chop, so your boat's lifting up and down, just bear in mind you may need to let out a lot more rope than you normally would in calmer conditions. 1.5 to 2 times the depth is what you're going to need. So make sure you've got enough rope on board to cover that. Otherwise, you're going to be tripping anchors left, right and centre, no matter what anchor you have on board. So summarising, I use a Danforth because I fish primarily soft ground and it works for me, but the Bruce and the Plough are really popular choices as well. If you have a small boat, a Grapnel will certainly do a job for you, even a mushroom if need be. Remember, you need a decent length of chain, the length of your vessel, and to carry enough rope for the depth you're going to fish. And importantly, an anchor is not just for fishing, it is a really important safety feature, so please, please don't leave home without one.